The story begins with a chilly autumn morning in a small town tucked away in New Hampshire. The leaves had turned shades of orange and red, painting the streets with vibrant colors. It was one of those days where the air felt crisp but carried a sense of warmth because of the holiday season just around the corner. Karoline Leavitt, a young woman everyone knew for her kindness and determination, found herself back at her old high school. She hadn't been there in years, not since she graduated and moved on to bigger things. But today she returned as part of a charity event aimed at helping students who didn't have much. Walking through the hallways brought back memories, some happy, some bittersweet. She remembered sitting in classrooms, scribbling notes while daydreaming about what life might hold after graduation. Back then, she never imagined she'd grow up to be someone people looked up to. Yet here she was now, standing in front of a crowd of eager faces, talking about giving back to the community. As the event wrapped up, Karoline took a moment to walk around the school. There was something comforting about being in these familiar spaces again. The squeak of sneakers on polished floors, the faint smell of chalk dust, it all felt like stepping into a time capsule. But as she rounded a corner near the gymnasium, something, or rather someone, caught her attention. It was the janitor, a man who had worked at the school longer than anyone could remember. His name wasn't mentioned often, but his presence was constant. Every day, without fail, he showed up early to sweep the floors, clean the bathrooms, and make sure the building stayed in good shape. He wasn't flashy or loud. He simply did his job with quiet dedication. Today, though, there was something different about him. Maybe it was the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of the heavy cleaning cart he pushed down the hallway. Or maybe it was the tired look in his eyes that told a story words couldn't fully capture. Karoline stopped in her tracks. Something inside her urged her to go talk to him. "Hey," she called out softly, not wanting to startle him. The man turned, clearly surprised to see her. Up close, she noticed the lines etched deeply into his face, evidence of years spent working hard to keep the school running smoothly. Despite his weary appearance, his smile was warm and genuine. "Hi there," he replied, setting the cart aside. "Can I help you with something?" For a moment, Karoline hesitated. What exactly did she want to say? She didn't know this man personally, but she recognized him from her own high school days. He'd always been friendly, offering a nod or a kind word whenever their paths crossed. Now, seeing him in this light, she realized how little she actually knew about him. All those years ago, she'd taken his work for granted, assuming it was just part of the background noise of school life. But looking at him now, she understood that behind every mop bucket and broom lay a person with a story worth hearing. "I'm Karoline," she said finally, extending her hand. "I used to go to school here. You probably don't remember me." The man chuckled lightly, shaking her hand. "Of course I do. You were one of the polite ones, not too rowdy, always said hello." His voice carried a hint of nostalgia, as if reminiscing about simpler times. "Name's Mr. Thompson, by the way." They stood there for a few moments, exchanging pleasantries before Karoline decided to dig a little deeper. "How long have you been working here, Mr. Thompson?" she asked casually. "Oh, let's see." He tilted his head thoughtfully. "Must be 22 years now, give or take. 22 years. That number hit Karoline harder than she expected. This man had dedicated more than 2 decades of his life to keeping the school clean and functional. And yet, how many people truly appreciated the effort he put in each day? Probably very few, she thought guiltily. Curiosity tugged at her, urging her to learn more. Without overthinking it, she asked, "Do you mind if we chat for a bit? Maybe grab a cup of coffee in the teacher's lounge?" Mr. Thompson seemed taken aback by the invitation, but nodded agreeably. "Sure thing. Could use a break anyway." As they settled into chairs in the quiet lounge, Karoline listened intently as Mr. Thompson opened up about his life. What started as casual conversation quickly turned into something deeper. She learned about his late wife, who had battled illness for years before passing away, about raising their teenage daughter alone, juggling work and parenting with no complaints, and perhaps most strikingly, about the struggles he faced daily, like relying on unreliable public transportation because his old car had broken down months ago. By the end of their talk, Karoline felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: admiration for Mr. Thompson's resilience, frustration at how easily people overlooked his sacrifices, and a burning desire to do something meaningful for him. Little did she know, this encounter would set off a chain reaction that would change both their lives forever. The conversation in the teacher's lounge lingered in Karoline's mind long after she left the school that day. Mr. Thompson's words echoed in her thoughts, painting a vivid picture of a life filled with quiet struggles and unwavering resilience. She couldn't shake the image of him trudging home after long hours of work, braving the cold without reliable transportation. It wasn't just his story that stayed with her. It was the realization of how many others like him existed, silently carrying burdens no one noticed. That night, as Karoline sat at her kitchen table sipping tea, she found herself staring out the window. The streetlights cast soft glows on the pavement, but her mind was far from peaceful. "What can I do?" she whispered to herself, more out of frustration than expectation. She had always believed in helping people, but this felt different. This wasn't about writing checks or organizing fundraisers. It was personal now. Mr. Thompson wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was someone who deserved more than empty thanks. An idea began to form, small at first but growing stronger with each passing moment. What if she could give him something practical, something that would genuinely make his life easier? Her gaze shifted to her car parked outside, a simple sedan, nothing fancy but reliable enough for her daily needs. Then it hit her. A vehicle. A sturdy SUV that could handle New Hampshire winters, carry his tools, and save him from hours spent waiting for buses or walking miles through snow and rain. But buying a car outright wasn't exactly within her budget. Even so, Karoline refused to let doubt derail her plan. She picked up her phone and started making calls to friends, family members, and local business owners she'd connected with over the years. To her surprise, almost everyone she reached out to was eager to help. Some offered financial contributions, while others suggested discounts on vehicles or services. One friend even mentioned knowing someone at a dealership willing to cut a deal for such a good cause. By the end of the evening, Karoline realized she might actually be able to pull this off. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. With the help of her network, she secured a mid-sized SUV, practical, dependable, and equipped with features perfect for someone like Mr. Thompson. It wasn't brand new, but it was in excellent condition, freshly detailed, and ready to serve its new owner well. Every detail mattered to Karoline because this wasn't just any gift. It was a symbol of gratitude and respect for a man who had given so much to the community without asking for anything in return. Now came the hard part, figuring out how to present the SUV to Mr. Thompson. Karoline wanted it to be special, not just a random handover, but a moment he'd remember forever. After some brainstorming, she decided to keep it simple yet heartfelt. She arranged to meet him at the school parking lot under the pretense of discussing future charity events. Knowing Mr. Thompson's humble nature, she didn't want him to feel singled out or uncomfortable. Still, excitement bubbled inside her as she imagined his reaction when he saw what awaited him. On the morning of the big day, Karoline arrived early at the school. She met with the team from the dealership, ensuring everything was set up perfectly. The SUV gleamed under the autumn sun, tied neatly with a giant red bow on top. It looked festive yet dignified, exactly what she hoped it would convey. As she stood beside it, double-checking last-minute details, nerves fluttered in her stomach. Would he understand why she did this? Would he accept it? Finally, Mr. Thompson appeared, bundled up in his usual jacket and cap. He greeted her warmly, oblivious to what was about to happen. "You sure are full of surprises," he joked, referring to their recent meeting. "What's all this about?" Karoline grinned, trying to mask her anticipation. "Just wait," she said lightly, gesturing for him to follow her. When they reached the SUV, she handed him the keys and asked him to close his eyes. "Trust me," she added with a playful smile. For a brief second, Mr. Thompson hesitated, clearly confused. But then, with a shrug and a chuckle, he obliged. Standing there blindfolded, clutching the keys tightly, he waited patiently. Karoline's heart raced as she watched him. This was it, the moment she'd been planning for days. Taking a deep breath, she finally said, "Okay. Open your eyes." When Mr. Thompson opened them, his jaw dropped. For a split second, he simply stared at the SUV, unable to process what he was seeing. Then, slowly, realization dawned on his face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Tears welled up in his eyes as he turned to look at Karoline. Disbelief etched across his features. Is this for me?" he stammered, his voice trembling. Karoline nodded, her own eyes glistening. "Yes," she replied softly. "It's my way of saying thank you for everything you've done for this school, for the kids, for everyone. You deserve it." Mr. Thompson didn't say anything at first. Instead, he stepped forward and pulled Karoline into a tight hug, his emotions spilling over. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with gratitude. This means more than you'll ever know." As they stood there together, surrounded by the quiet hum of the schoolyard, Karoline felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about giving a car. It was about showing someone that their efforts mattered, that they were seen and valued. And judging by the look on Mr. Thompson's face, the message had landed perfectly. Little did either of them know, however, that this act of kindness was only the beginning. Word of what happened spread faster than Karoline anticipated, sparking reactions that would ripple far beyond the confines of their small town. The moment Karoline handed over the keys to Mr. Thompson, she had no idea how much of an impact it would have, not just on him, but on everyone who heard about it. What started as a quiet gesture of gratitude quickly turned into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. Later that evening, after the surprise was over and Mr. Thompson had driven his new SUV home for the first time, Karoline posted about the day on social media. She didn't do it to brag or seek attention. Instead, she wanted to share the story because she thought it might inspire others to think about the people in their own lives who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Her post was simple. A picture of the SUV with its big red bow, a few heartfelt words about Mr. Thompson's dedication, and a note encouraging others to recognize unsung heroes in their communities. Within hours, the post went viral. It wasn't flashy or overly dramatic. It was real, raw, and deeply human. People from all over the country began sharing it, commenting on how moved they were by the act of kindness. Some shared stories of their own Mr. Thompsons, the janitors, bus drivers, teachers' aides, and other workers who kept schools and communities running smoothly, without ever seeking recognition. Others expressed regret for not noticing these individuals sooner, vowing to start paying closer attention. Local news outlets picked up the story too. Reporters called Karoline, asking for interviews. At first, she hesitated. This wasn't about her, it was about Mr. Thompson and the message she hoped to spread. But eventually she agreed to speak publicly, knowing it might amplify the cause. During one interview, she said, "This isn't about me buying a car. It's about saying thank you to someone who has given so much of himself to this community. If we can take a moment to appreciate people like him, imagine the difference it could make." As the days passed, the response grew even more incredible. Donations poured in, not for Karoline, but for Mr. Thompson. Strangers sent money to help cover insurance costs, gas, and maintenance for the SUV. One local mechanic offered free tune-ups for as long as Mr. Thompson owned the vehicle. Another person donated winter tires to ensure he'd be safe during snowstorms. Even businesses outside the town joined in, offering discounts on groceries, clothes, and household items. But perhaps the most touching part of it all was the way it brought people together. Neighbors who barely knew each other began talking, sharing stories about the hardworking folks in their area. Kids at the high school started leaving notes of appreciation for Mr. Thompson in his cleaning cart, thanking him for keeping their school clean and welcoming. Teachers invited him to staff meetings, making sure he felt included as part of the team rather than just an employee tucked away in the background. For Mr. Thompson, the whirlwind of attention was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and at times he admitted feeling a bit uncomfortable with all the praise. But deep down, he understood what it meant. For years he'd gone unnoticed, his contributions taken for granted. Now suddenly, he was being celebrated not just for what he did, but for who he was. A kind, hard-working man who never complained, even when life got tough. One evening, about a week after the SUV surprise, Karoline decided to visit Mr. Thompson at home. She hadn't seen him since the big reveal and wanted to check in, see how he was adjusting to everything. When she arrived, she found him sitting on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the sunset. The SUV was parked proudly in the driveway, looking every bit as shiny as it had the day he received it. "Hey, stranger," Karoline said with a smile, climbing the steps to join him. "How's it going?" Mr. Thompson chuckled, shaking his head. "I still can't believe this is real," he admitted, gesturing toward the SUV. "Every time I drive it, I feel like I'm dreaming. Like any second, someone's gonna tap me on the shoulder and tell me it's all a mistake." Karoline laughed softly. "It's not a mistake. You earned this, plain and simple." They sat there for a while, chatting about everything that had happened since the gift. Mr. Thompson told her about the flood of messages he'd received from people he barely knew, all expressing gratitude and admiration. He showed her a stack of handwritten letters from students, some of which made him tear up as he read them aloud. One note, written in shaky handwriting, said, "Thank you for making our school nice. We see you working even when we don't say hi." "It's funny," Mr. Thompson said, folding the letter carefully and tucking it back into the pile. "All these years I figured nobody noticed. Turns out they did. They just didn't know how to say it until now." Karoline nodded, thinking about how true that statement was. So often people assumed their efforts went unseen, especially when those efforts involved jobs society deemed ordinary or unglamorous. But the truth was, people noticed, they just needed reminders to speak up. As the conversation shifted, Mr. Thompson surprised Karoline with something unexpected. "You know," he began, his tone thoughtful, "this whole thing has made me realize something. Life doesn't have to be about waiting for things to get better. Sometimes you've got to take what you've been given and use it to help someone else." Karoline tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Well," he continued, "seeing how many people came together for me, it made me want to give back too. I've started volunteering at the shelter downtown, helping families who are struggling. It's not much, but it feels good to pay it forward, you know?" Karoline's eyes widened in amazement. Here was a man who had spent decades quietly serving others, and now, inspired by the kindness shown to him, he was finding new ways to make a difference. It was a beautiful cycle, one that reminded her why she had done this in the first place. "You're amazing," she said sincerely. "Really. Most people wouldn't think twice about giving back after everything you've been through, but here you are doing exactly that." Mr. Thompson shrugged modestly, though a small smile played on his lips. "Kindness spreads, doesn't it? Someone gives to you and you pass it along. That's how the world should work." Sitting there under the fading light of the autumn sky, Karoline realized something important. This story wasn't just about a car or a janitor or a politician trying to make a difference. It was about connection, the invisible threads that tied people together, reminding them they weren't alone. And as she looked at Mr. Thompson, she couldn't help but feel hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, acts like these could inspire others to look around, see the people in their midst, and choose kindness over indifference. Little did either of them know, the ripple effects of their actions were only beginning to unfold. The ripple effects of Karoline's gesture didn't stop with Mr. Thompson or the outpouring of support from strangers. It spread much farther than anyone could have predicted. What started as a personal act of kindness soon became a catalyst for change, inspiring people in ways no one saw coming. Word of the SUV surprise reached neighboring towns and even made its way to national news outlets. People were captivated by the story, not just because it was heartwarming, but because it felt so genuine. In a world often dominated by flashy headlines and grand gestures, This was refreshingly simple. One person deciding to do something meaningful for another without expecting anything in return. It reminded viewers that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can leave the biggest impact. Local schools began using the story as an example during assemblies and classroom discussions. Teachers encouraged students to think about the unsung heroes in their own lives. The cafeteria workers, bus drivers, custodians, and volunteers who kept things running smoothly behind the scenes. Some classes took it a step further, organizing projects to show appreciation. One elementary school created handmade cards and delivered them to the janitorial staff, while another high school hosted a thank you day, where students surprised support staff with coffee, snacks, and heartfelt notes. Businesses also jumped on board, eager to be part of the movement. A local car dealership that had helped Karoline secure the SUV announced a program offering discounted vehicles to low-income families in need. Other companies followed suit, donating supplies, services, or funds to organizations supporting struggling individuals. Even small businesses got involved, like the bakery down the street that started giving free pastries to essential workers every Friday morning. But perhaps the most surprising outcome was how the story inspired people to take action in their own lives. Families began having conversations at dinner tables about kindness and gratitude. Neighbors reconnected, sharing stories about the people in their communities who quietly contributed in ways they hadn't noticed before. Social media lit up with posts tagged #Pay It Forward NH, where people shared photos and videos of themselves doing good deeds, big and small for others. From shoveling snow for elderly neighbors to leaving encouraging messages on windshields, the trend caught on quickly. Karoline watched all of this unfold with a mix of awe and humility. She never imagined her decision to help Mr. Thompson would spark such widespread positivity. At first, she worried the attention might overshadow the real message, that recognizing and appreciating everyday heroes matters. But instead, it amplified it. People weren't just talking about what she had done, they were taking steps to make similar changes in their own corners of the world. One day, while visiting the high school again, Karoline overheard two students discussing their plans to volunteer at the same shelter where Mr. Thompson now spent his evenings. Curious, she approached them after class. "I heard you guys talking about volunteering," she said with a smile. "Mind if I ask why?" The students glanced at each other, slightly embarrassed but proud. "We saw what happened with Mr. Thompson," one of them explained. "It made us realize we don't do enough to help people. So, we figured, why not start somewhere?" Karoline nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "That's incredible. Honestly, that's exactly what I hoped would happen when I did this." "It wasn't just about the car, though," the second student chimed in. "It was about showing someone they matter, like really matter. That's what we want to do too." Their words stayed with Karoline long after the conversation ended. They reinforced something she'd always believed, that everyone has the power to create positive change no matter how small their actions may seem. Sometimes all it takes is planting a seed and letting others nurture it into something bigger. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson continued embracing his newfound role as both a recipient and giver of kindness. Volunteering at the shelter had become one of the highlights of his week. He loved chatting with families, listening to their stories, and finding ways to lighten their load, even if it was just by sharing a warm meal or lending a sympathetic ear. The staff there joked that he was becoming a local celebrity, thanks to all the attention his story had received. But Mr. Thompson brushed off the compliments. To him, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making connections and reminding people they weren't alone. On one particularly cold evening, as he helped serve dinner at the shelter, a young boy tugged at his sleeve. "Are you the guy with the car?" the child asked innocently. Mr. Thompson chuckled, kneeling down to meet the boy's eye level. "Yeah, that's me," he replied. "Why do you ask?" "My mom says you're a hero," the boy said earnestly, holding out a drawing he'd made earlier. It was a colorful picture of a shiny SUV surrounded by smiling stick figures. "She told me your story. I want to be like you when I grow up." For a moment, Mr. Thompson was speechless. Then, with a grin, he ruffled the boy's hair and said, You already are, buddy. Just keep being kind, okay? Stories like these continued to surface, each one adding another layer to the growing tapestry of goodwill sparked by Karoline's initial act. And yet, despite all the attention and praise, neither she nor Mr. Thompson let it go to their heads. Both remained grounded, focused on the bigger picture, fostering a culture of gratitude and generosity that could endure long after the spotlight faded. As weeks turned into months, the town seemed transformed. Conversations shifted from complaints about minor inconveniences to discussions about how to lift each other up. People smiled more, held doors open for strangers, and took time to acknowledge those whose efforts often went unnoticed. It wasn't perfect. Life still had its challenges, but there was a palpable sense of unity and purpose that hadn't existed before. And through it all, Karoline and Mr. Thompson remained connected, checking in regularly and sharing updates about their respective journeys. Their bond had grown beyond giver and receiver. They were now partners in a shared mission to spread kindness wherever they went. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain. The ripples they'd created together would continue to expand, touching lives in ways they might never fully understand. As the months rolled on, the story of Karoline and Mr. Thompson didn't fade into the background like so many viral moments tend to do. Instead, it seemed to sink deeper into the fabric of the community, becoming a part of its identity. People weren't just talking about kindness, they were living it. And at the heart of it all was a growing sense that even the smallest actions could create lasting change. One crisp winter morning, Karoline received an unexpected phone call. It was from a woman who introduced herself as a volunteer coordinator at a nearby nonprofit organization. "I hope this isn't too forward," the caller began hesitantly, "but we're hosting a community event next month, and we'd love for you and Mr. Thompson to speak. Your story has inspired so many people here, and we think it could inspire even more." Karoline paused, considering the request. Public speaking wasn't something she took lightly. It came with responsibility, especially when emotions ran high. But after a moment's thought, she agreed. "If it helps encourage others to recognize the good around them, then I'm in," she replied warmly. When she told Mr. Thompson about the invitation later that day, he looked both surprised and slightly nervous. "Me? Speak in front of a crowd?" he asked, scratching his head. "I've never done anything like that before." "You don't have to be perfect," Karoline reassured him. "Just tell your truth. That's what moves people, not fancy words or rehearsed speeches." On the day of the event, the room buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people had gathered. Families, students, teachers, business owners, all eager to hear firsthand how one act of kindness had sparked such widespread positivity. As Karoline and Mr. Thompson took the stage together, the audience erupted into applause. For a moment, they simply stood there soaking it in before Karoline turned to Mr. Thompson with an encouraging nod. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, gripping the microphone tightly. "I'll be honest," he started, his voice steady despite his nerves. "When this whole thing began, I didn't think much of it. Sure, getting the SUV was life-changing for me, but what really stuck with me was how it made me feel seen. Like my work mattered, like I mattered." He paused, glancing at Karoline briefly before continuing. "And that's why I started volunteering at the shelter. Because if someone could see value in me, a guy who spends most of his day scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, then maybe I could help others see value in themselves too." The crowd erupted again, this time with cheers and whistles. When it was Karoline's turn to speak, she kept her message short but powerful. "This isn't about me or Mr. Thompson," she said firmly. "It's about all of us. Every single person in this room has the power to make someone's day better, to remind them they're not invisible. You don't need money or resources to do that. All you need is a willingness to care." After their speeches, the pair stayed behind to mingle with attendees. Dozens of people lined up to thank them, sharing personal stories of how the movement had impacted their lives. A mother tearfully recounted how her son had started helping neighbors shovel snow after hearing about Mr. Thompson. A retired teacher revealed she'd begun mentoring struggling students because the story reminded her of the importance of connection. Even a local teenager admitted he'd stopped bullying classmates after realizing everyone carried unseen burdens. What struck Karoline and Mr. Thompson most, however, were the quiet moments between these interactions. The subtle nods of understanding, the shared smiles, the unspoken acknowledgement that they were all part of something bigger than themselves. These small exchanges reinforced the idea that kindness wasn't just an action. It was a mindset, a way of seeing the world through eyes, wide open to possibility. In the weeks following the event, the momentum continued to build. Schools across the state adopted programs aimed at celebrating unsung heroes within their communities. Local businesses formed partnerships with nonprofits to provide ongoing support for families in need. Even churches and community centers hosted workshops focused on empathy and gratitude, teaching participants practical ways to spread positivity in their daily lives. For Karoline, watching this transformation unfold filled her with a profound sense of purpose. She realized now more than ever that leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about creating space for others to shine. Her decision to honor Mr. Thompson hadn't just changed his life. It had given countless others permission to believe in the goodness of humanity. But perhaps the greatest testament to the movement's success came during a casual conversation between Karoline and Mr. Thompson one spring afternoon. They were sitting on his porch again, sipping lemonade as birds chirped in the distance. The SUV sat proudly in the driveway, still gleaming despite months of use. "You know," Mr. Thompson said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking lately. This whole experience has taught me something important." "What's that?" Karoline asked curiously. "That kindness isn't just about giving, it's about receiving too," he explained. "Before all this, I always thought I had to tough things out on my own. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness. But now I see that letting people in, allowing them to support you, that's strength too." Karoline nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "And honestly, it makes me proud. Not just of what we've done, but of who you are." Mr. Thompson chuckled, shaking his head modestly. "Let's not kid ourselves. None of this would have happened without you taking the first step." "Maybe," Karoline replied with a grin. "But remember what you said earlier. Kindness spreads. It doesn't belong to any one person. Once it starts moving, it takes on a life of its own." As they sat there basking in the warmth of the sun and the bond they'd built, neither of them could predict exactly where this journey would lead. What they did know, though, was that the seeds they'd planted were growing roots deep enough to weather any storm. And while the world outside might still face challenges, their little corner of it felt brighter, kinder, and infinitely more connected than ever before. As the months rolled on, the story of Karoline and Mr. Thompson didn't fade into the background like so many viral moments tend to do. Instead, it seemed to sink deeper into the fabric of the community, becoming a part of its identity. People weren't just talking about kindness, they were living it. And at the heart of it all was a growing sense that even the smallest actions could create lasting change. One crisp winter morning, Karoline received an unexpected phone call. It was from a woman who introduced herself as a volunteer coordinator at a nearby nonprofit organization. "I hope this isn't too forward," the caller began hesitantly, "but we're hosting a community event next month, and we'd love for you and Mr. Thompson to speak. Your story has inspired so many people here, and we think it could inspire even more." Karoline paused, considering the request. Public speaking wasn't something she took lightly. It came with responsibility, especially when emotions ran high. But after a moment's thought, she agreed. "If it helps encourage others to recognize the good around them, then I'm in," she replied warmly. When she told Mr. Thompson about the invitation later that day, he looked both surprised and slightly nervous. "Me? Speak in front of a crowd?" he asked, scratching his head. "I've never done anything like that before." "You don't have to be perfect," Karoline reassured him. "Just tell your truth. That's what moves people, not fancy words or rehearsed speeches." On the day of the event, the room buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people had gathered. Families, students, teachers, business owners, all eager to hear firsthand how one act of kindness had sparked such widespread positivity. As Karoline and Mr. Thompson took the stage together, the audience erupted into applause. For a moment, they simply stood there soaking it in before Karoline turned to Mr. Thompson with an encouraging nod. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, gripping the microphone tightly. "I'll be honest," he started, his voice steady despite his nerves. "When this whole thing began, I didn't think much of it. Sure, getting the SUV was life-changing for me, but what really stuck with me was how it made me feel seen. Like my work mattered, like I mattered." He paused, glancing at Karoline briefly before continuing. "And that's why I started volunteering at the shelter. Because if someone could see value in me, a guy who spends most of his days scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, then maybe I could help others see value in themselves too." The crowd erupted again, this time with cheers and whistles. When it was Karoline's turn to speak, she kept her message short but powerful. "This isn't about me or Mr. Thompson," she said firmly. "It's about all of us. Every single person in this room has the power to make someone's day better, to remind them they're not invisible. You don't need money or resources to do that. All you need is a willingness to care." After their speeches, the pair stayed behind to mingle with attendees. Dozens of people lined up to thank them, sharing personal stories of how the movement had impacted their lives. A mother tearfully recounted how her son had started helping neighbors shovel snow after hearing about Mr. Thompson. A retired teacher revealed she'd begun mentoring struggling students because the story reminded her of the importance of connection. Even a local teenager admitted he'd stopped bullying classmates after realizing everyone carried unseen burdens. What struck Karoline and Mr. Thompson most, however, were the quiet moments between these interactions. The subtle nods of understanding, the shared smiles, the unspoken acknowledgement that they were all part of something bigger than themselves. These small exchanges reinforced the idea that kindness wasn't just an action. It was a mindset, a way of seeing the world through eyes, wide open to possibility. In the weeks following the event, the momentum continued to build. Schools across the state adopted programs aimed at celebrating unsung heroes within their communities. Local businesses formed partnerships with nonprofits to provide ongoing support for families in need. Even churches and community centers hosted workshops focused on empathy and gratitude, teaching participants practical ways to spread positivity in their daily lives. For Karoline, watching this transformation unfold filled her with a profound sense of purpose. She realized now more than ever that leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about creating space for others to shine. Her decision to honor Mr. Thompson hadn't just changed his life. It had given countless others permission to believe in the goodness of humanity. But perhaps the greatest testament to the movement's success came during a casual conversation between Karoline and Mr. Thompson one spring afternoon. They were sitting on his porch again, sipping lemonade as birds chirped in the distance. The SUV sat proudly in the driveway, still gleaming despite months of use. "You know," Mr. Thompson said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking lately. This whole experience has taught me something important." "What's that?" Karoline asked curiously. "That kindness isn't just about giving, it's about receiving too," he explained. "Before all this, I always thought I had to tough things out on my own. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness. But now I see that letting people in, allowing them to support you, that's strength too." Karoline nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "That's beautiful," she said softly. "And honestly, it makes me proud. Not just of what we've done, but of who you are." Mr. Thompson chuckled, shaking his head modestly. "Let's not kid ourselves. None of this would have happened without you taking the first step." "Maybe," Karoline replied with a grin. "But remember what you said earlier. Kindness spreads. It doesn't belong to any one person. Once it starts moving, it takes on a life of its own." As they sat there basking in the warmth of the sun and the bond they'd built, neither of them could predict exactly where this journey would lead. What they did know, though, was that the seeds they'd planted were growing roots deep enough to weather any storm. And while the world outside might still face challenges, their little corner of it felt brighter, kinder, and infinitely more connected than ever before. As the years passed, the story of Karoline and Mr. Thompson didn't just remain a memory. It evolved into a legacy. The small act of kindness that began with an SUV had grown into something far greater than either of them could have anticipated. It wasn't just about one man or one car anymore. It was about the countless lives touched by the ripple effect of their actions. Karoline continued her work in public service, but she carried the lessons of this experience with her everywhere she went. She realized that leadership wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping reforms. It was about seeing people for who they truly were and meeting them where they stood. Her speeches became less about policies and more about humanity, focusing on the power of connection and empathy. Audiences listened intently, not because of her title or position, but because they could feel the sincerity in her words. Mr. Thompson, too, embraced his role as an unexpected symbol of resilience and gratitude. He never stopped working at the school. He couldn't imagine leaving the place that had been such a big part of his life, but he also kept volunteering at the shelter. Over time, he became a mentor to many of the families who came through its doors. People sought him out, not just for advice but for comfort, knowing he understood hardship in a way few others did. His presence alone reminded them that even in the darkest moments there was hope. The town itself seemed transformed. What had once been a quiet, unassuming community now buzzed with energy and purpose. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, eager to share stories or offer help when needed. Local businesses thrived, not just financially but socially, becoming hubs of generosity and support. Schools adopted programs inspired by Kindness Week, teaching students the value of compassion and encouraging them to look beyond themselves. Even the youngest members of the community, kids barely old enough to tie their shoes, could be seen picking up litter or holding doors open for strangers. One day, during a crisp autumn morning, much like the one when Karoline first surprised Mr. Thompson, the two found themselves back at the high school. This time, however, they weren't alone. Hundreds of people had gathered in the parking lot, standing beside rows of vehicles decorated with red bows. It was the 5th anniversary of the original SUV gift, and the town had decided to celebrate in a special way by organizing a massive pay-it-forward event. Local dealerships, mechanics, and donors had come together to provide cars to individuals and families in need. Each recipient had been nominated by someone in the community, a neighbor, co-worker, or friend who recognized their struggles and wanted to make a difference. As names were called and keys handed over, tears flowed freely, hugs were exchanged, and cheers echoed across the lot. For Karoline and Mr. Thompson, watching it all unfold felt surreal yet deeply fulfilling. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse, Karoline turned to Mr. Thompson with a smile. "Can you believe how far this has come?" she asked, gesturing toward the bustling scene around them. He shook his head, still marveling at everything. "Never in a million years," he admitted. "But I guess that's the thing about kindness. It doesn't stay small for long." They walked together toward the edge of the parking lot, taking a moment to reflect. Around them, laughter and conversation filled the air, punctuated by the occasional honk of a newly gifted car. Families posed for photos next to their vehicles, grinning ear to ear, while volunteers scurried about ensuring everyone left with what they needed. "You know," Karoline said thoughtfully, "this isn't really about us anymore." "It hasn't been for a long time," Mr. Thompson nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "It belongs to everyone now. And honestly, that's the best part." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the gathering, both Karoline and Mr. Thompson felt a profound sense of peace. They had started something beautiful, but it no longer belonged solely to them. It lived in the hearts of everyone who had chosen to participate, in every child learning to care, every adult choosing to notice, and every stranger deciding to lend a hand. Years later, long after the details of the original story faded from headlines, its spirit endured. Parents told their children about the janitor and the politician who sparked change with a single act of kindness. Teachers used the tale to teach lessons on gratitude and humility. Even those who hadn't been directly involved carried its message forward, passing it along like a treasured heirloom. For Karoline, the journey reinforced her belief in the power of action. No matter how daunting the world might seem, one step, even a small one, could set off a chain reaction capable of transforming lives. For Mr. Thompson, it was proof that kindness wasn't wasted. It always found its way back, often in ways you least expected. And so, the story of Karoline Leavitt and Mr. Thompson became more than just a chapter in their lives. It became a reminder that humanity is at its best when we choose to see each other clearly, treat each other kindly, and lift each other up. Their legacy wasn't written in stone or etched on plaques. It was alive in the smiles of strangers, the warmth of shared moments, and the boundless potential of human connection. In the end, the most powerful lesson wasn't about cars or recognition. It was about love. Love for your neighbor, love for your community, and love for the idea that even in a world full of challenges, we have the power to create light. And as long as people chose to carry that light with them, the story would continue, spreading farther and touching more lives than either Karoline or Mr. Thompson ever dreamed possible.